Hello and welcome everyone. This is the first podcast for Chapter 13, Day 21. This chapter focuses on meiosis and how we generate genetic diversity. To begin with, we're going to start in this objective talking mainly about the differences between asexual and sexual reproduction. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's begin with talking about asexual reproduction. Several kinds of organisms undergo asexual reproduction. They include bacteria, amoeba, yeast, several kinds of plants such as spider plants. If you've ever been given a stem from a spider plant to start growing your own plant, that does this by asexual reproduction. And then there are some animals like planaria that undergo asexual reproduction. Let's talk about a simple single-celled eukaryotic organism like yeast. Yeast undergoes asexual reproduction. So let's just write asexual here to generate two new yeast cells. It does this by mitosis. So let's write mitosis underneath it. Asexual reproduction by mitosis. Mitosis is the exact same cell division that we talked about a few weeks ago. Remember, one of the features of mitosis is that it creates a genetically identical individual when it divides. So let's list some advantages and some disadvantages of asexual reproduction by mitosis. So let's list some advantages and disadvantages of asexual reproduction by mitosis. So some advantages. One of the advantages is that only need one parent. Just like we see up here with the single-celled yeast, it divides by mitosis, creating two new cells. No other parent is needed. Another advantage, it reproduces quickly. So let's say quick reproduction. This third advantage, let's just write makes clones. This isn't always a good thing, but in this example, it makes a lot of sense. An organism that has a set of genes in it that allows it to optimally survive in one environment and does it quite well, it's convenient to be able to make a genetic clone of that over and over again, particularly when it's doing it really quickly. It allows it to maximally occupy that particular environment. Now, there are, of course, some disadvantages. Oh, there's another advantage we should list here. It kind of has to do with the quick reproduction rates, but it's also energetically cheap. Now let's list some disadvantages. There is no genetic diversity. We'll see when we talk about sexual reproduction. The advantage of sexual reproduction is that a lot of genetic diversity is generated. But in case of asexual reproduction, there's no genetic diversity. You have a collection of clones. Another disadvantage, it's more difficult to adapt to new environments. So I'm just going to write difficult to adapt. The other and last disadvantage is if they're all clones and if the environment changes in such a way that kills one of them, they pretty much all go. So it's kind of one goes, let's just be more specific here. If one dies, they all die, or they're all more likely to die. All right, that's a pretty big disadvantage. Now let's talk a little bit about sexual reproduction on this next slide. Okay, let's talk about sexual reproduction. I should have mentioned on the last slide that some some organisms that reproduce asexually will also reproduce sexually. So they can take advantage of both types of reproduction. So let's draw two people here. We'll draw them as stick figures. We'll make this one down here female, give her the female signal, and the one up here we'll make male with the male symbol here. we're going to talk about sexual reproduction using humans as an example, but recognize that sexual reproduction occurs throughout the many different organisms found in both animals and plants and fungi. But we're going to use humans just as an example here. So humans, as well as other animals, are made up of somatic cells and gamete cells. Let's go and write those terms down below here. Somatic cells, we sort of mentioned this on the last podcast with the stem cells. Somatic cells are our body cells. These are the cells that make up our liver, our stomach, our pancreas, our muscles, our brain, our eyes, all of the cells of our body, except those cells that happen to be our gametes. And gametes are sperm or egg, just depending upon which gender you're looking at. Body cells are typically what we call diploid cells. Sperm and egg, or gametes, are typically called haploid cells. Diploid cells in humans, have 46 chromosomes. Haploid cells have 23 chromosomes. Now this is just in humans, these numbers here. But in any other organism, the somatic cells, the diploid cells here, whatever that number is, the haploid cells are going to be half that. So if on an exam question we said, this particular organism had 50 chromosomes in their diploid cells, how many are in their haploid cells? You would just divide 50 by 2, and you'd have 25 for that organism's haploid. But for now, we're going to stick with humans as our example here. These somatic cells, which have 46 chromosomes, they typically divide and reproduce these cells using mitosis. And this is what we talked about on the last slide with asexual reproduction, and previously in this a few weeks ago. Sperm and egg, the haploid cells, which contain 23 chromosomes, they are formed through a different kind of cell division called meiosis. These body cells, when they divide by mitosis, they are identical. So we're going to put clones. They're clones of each other. And this is exactly what you want. When your liver cells divides, you want it to make a liver cell. However, when you create sperm or egg, they have great diversity. Meiosis generates diversity. So this individual up here, they reproduce all their somatic cells by mitosis, and then they produce their gametes. So let's draw a little sperm here, and likewise the female here, she produces all of her somatic cells by mitosis, but she produces her gametes, her oocytes, the eggs, by meiosis. So let's write the term meiosis here. And we should probably write the term meiosis here too, just so we don't forget. These two now come together, and when they unite, they form the zygote. Now, because meiosis generated genetic diversity, that is, made the genome of these gametes different than the cells of each of the original parents, this zygote now has considerable genetic diversity compared to its parents. So what I'm going to write below here may seem a little confusing. It's very genetically diverse, so let's write genetic diverse. Yet, they are also genetically similar. So this zygote, which will now go on and go through development to eventually produce the progeny, this progeny is going to look similar to mom and dad because it shares many of the genes, but it will be genetically different enough that it won't look identical to these two individuals. I mean, you can look at your own family pictures and see this, right? That you may look very similar to some members of your family, and in others you have no idea the differences you see. So I'm kind of running out of room quick on this slide, but I think it's important for us to list a couple advantages and disadvantages of sexual reproduction. particularly as it compares to asexual. So I'm going to just kind of block off a space up here. I'm going to write the word ADV here for advantages and see if we can come up with some advantages for sexual reproduction. The first one, which we've already mentioned, right, is that it generates diversity. So let's just write diversity here. And then let's write this diversity within a population of individual helps drive evolution. Now some disadvantages of sexual reproduction. Let's see if we can come up with a couple here. You need two parents. So sometimes requiring two parents creates problems. Sometimes the individuals within a particular ecosystem are very far apart. This is particularly true when their numbers start to dwindle. I remember seeing this video on a particular tree frog that was about to go extinct. And they found this one tree frog and it couldn't find a mate. And because it couldn't find a mate, it eventually died and that species no longer exists. So there is a disadvantage sometimes when you need two parents. Another advantage, I'm going to list two more disadvantages here. Disadvantage is it requires a lot, and I'm going to draw an up arrow to indicate a lot, of energy. This is not free, right? This takes a lot of energy to produce these gametes and to have fertilization, and then this long period of developing a whole new organism here. It costs a lot of energy. It also takes more time. So let's write more time. You're not just creating a new organism by dividing one time. This takes a lot of time, and so that's a disadvantage as well. Okay, that ends Objective 1 for this Chapter 13, Day 21. If you have any questions, make sure you come see us. If not, we'll see you in class. Bye.